The story began 249 years ago in a peaceful and stable land. On an ordinary day, people seemed busy with their usual lives, wandering through the markets and talking, unaware of the looming danger on the horizon. Suddenly, a huge portal appeared in the sky, heralding the beginning of a great disaster, as frightening creatures from another world descended from it. These creatures, which would later be called demons, immediately began a brutal attack on the humans. After their descent, the demons openly declared their invasion of humanity and began to spread destruction. And from here was the true beginning of the demons' invasion of humanity. Facing this dangerous situation, the Orthodox Alliance formed a group of warriors called the Orthodox Sky Demon Extermination Corps, and they announced that they would confront these invaders. But after only 3 days, they clashed with the Demon Legion in Manhwa and were tragically defeated. A year later, half the population of the Central Plains had been killed, and the warriors from the Orthodox and non-Orthodox factions tried to work together one last time, forming a final front of resistance in Sichuan. This final battle lasted for more than half a month of continuous fighting. Despite their efforts, 90% of the resistance army was killed, and the Mary of the Central Plains was completely annihilated. As for the few survivors, they became slaves and were cruelly dragged into the demon world. The protagonist of the story himself was one of those captives who were dragged into that terrifying world. After 5 years of captivity, torture, and horrific experiments, he was classified as a rare type due to his inability to use internal energy from birth. So, he was subjected to cruel experiments and turned into a living weapon. As a result, he became part of the demon world's subjugation army after undergoing intensive brainwashing. Decades later, he invaded other dimensions and participated in bloody massacres, killing many innocent people. He continued to kill relentlessly in a bloody life full of massacres and gore. 75 years after being turned into a warrior slave, his brutal contributions were recognized, and he became a prestigious commander among the demons. 120 years after his promotion to the rank of commander, he became a fearsome and revered warrior. But at this time, he discovered a great secret that changed everything. He then spent 50 years of continuous research on the conditions and methods that would allow him to reveal this mysterious secret. After another 65 years, the great rebellion he had meticulously planned against the demons began. A week after the rebellion started, events reached the present time, but the loss was evident on the bloody battlefields. In a harsh confrontation with the Demon King himself, it was confirmed that his rebellion had tragically failed. The Demon King, Tarrant, expressed his deep disappointment in the protagonist, Schweitz, for his rebellion. Despite all his previous contributions as a commander, the king then addressed him directly and insultingly, using his former name, Schweitz von Greentail, which prompted Schweitz to respond with violence and bitterness, vehemently rejecting the name he hated so much. And then Schweitz announced his real name, which he uttered with a defiant scream, "My name is Sapaigang." The Demon King Tarrant spoke, expressing his great confusion towards humans, explaining that he had been watching Sapaigang for a long time. While his abilities and talents were weak, he possessed a strange obsession with survival no matter the circumstances, which the king considered his only source of strength. The Demon King wondered why Sapaigang acted so recklessly after all these years, to which Sapaigang replied that he had to do it to experience the fight for himself at least once. He explained that this was necessary to ensure victory in the next confrontation, as he needed to know his true abilities against him. The Demon King found this thinking interesting, but also described it as naive and foolish. The king then told him that today would be the end of his life, and he would not give him a second chance. But Sapaigang refused to be killed by the Demon King, affirming with strong determination that he would not allow it. Despite the severe injuries he had received, Sapaigang shouted with all his might, and in a sudden moment he used a superhuman power. That caused a tremendous light to pierce through the place. Then the Demon King realized what was happening and said in amazement, surprised by the technique Sapaigang used, which was the return of time, saying it was the authority of Nozeron, the old master of evil. He then followed up by saying that he now understood everything. The king continued, saying that all the pain and defeat Sapaigang endured for 120 years were just for this moment. With overwhelming anger and great defiance, Sapaigang shouted in the Demon King's face, threatening him, and told him to just wait for the next time, when he would fight them all, and none of them would survive this time. Despite this, the Demon King only showed a sarcastic smile and affirmed that he looked forward to this challenge. Acknowledging Sapaigang for the first time as the only human he respected, then everything disappeared in a massive explosion. In another scene, the events returned to the Murim of the Central Plains, specifically 10 full years before the demon invasion. The place appeared peaceful at the Dragon Spring Martial Arts Academy of the Orthodox Alliance. Some workers talked about the strange lightning that struck the roof of the training ground with enough force to destroy it. One of the workers mentioned with relief that the only person injured in this incident was that failure. It then became clear that the failure in question was Sapai Gang, the martial arts instructor, who could not use internal energy. Although his injury was not severe, someone sarcastically expressed their wish that he had been seriously injured, because this very day was the date of his public execution. After that, the execution ceremony began in a special way. As an official announced the start of the formal duel for the position of assistant spear instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy. The duel began at the Dragon Spring Academy between the current assistant spear instructor, Sapai Gang, and his challenger, Maing Sondeok, who was known by the title The Invincible Divine Spear, with the aim of verifying Sapai Gang's eligibility for the assistant instructor position. Maing Sondeok stood smiling confidently, waiting for the duel to begin, stating that he thought Sapai Gang would evade the confrontation under the pretext of injury, especially after hearing about the incident of him being struck by lightning. Despite this, Sapai Gang stood firmly without showing any weakness or anxiety, which puzzled Maing Sondeok. The duel was officially announced to have begun, with a warning that both must fight honorably as true warriors. Initially, Maing Sondeok expressed his surprise at Sapai Gang's performance, saying that he seemed better than he had expected. Maing Sondeok mocked the lightning incident again, accusing Sapai Gang of perhaps fabricating this excuse to avoid facing him, but he ultimately decided to end the battle quickly, out of respect for his courage. Sondeok suggested that Sapai Gang should surrender in the distant future, completely underestimating him. Sapai Gang began to remember the past and how he suffered from everyone's contempt because he was an instructor at a martial arts academy without the ability to use internal energy. He remembered the humiliating defeat he had previously suffered in a public duel, how he lost his position as an instructor and was forced to do demeaning and lowly jobs, which made him live through extremely harsh days. All of this made Sapai Gang prepare for this specific moment, which he had been eagerly awaiting. Maing Sondeok felt annoyed by Sapai Gang's words as he did not understand them, and he asked angrily about the nonsense he was spouting, while Sapai Gang smiled defiantly and declared that he had waited a long time for this moment to face him. Maing Sondeok's anger grew because of the arrogance Sapai Gang displayed, and he said that he had intended to allow him some pride out of respect for being an instructor. Maing Sondeok began to use the Bull Demon Spear art with great force, as he angrily declared that it was time to silence the arrogant Sapai Gang forever. His eyes appeared to be glowing with anger, as he launched a massive attack using the first form Wild Bull's Charge. Sondeok was surprised when he felt no impact from his attack on his spear at all, which increased his confusion. Sapai Gang mockingly replied that his attack looked good, but it needed to hit its target first to have any meaning. Sondeok tried to attack Sapai Gang again with great force and intense anger, but the latter managed to dodge it with surprising ease. Maing Sondeok was stunned, wondering to himself how Sapai Gang managed to dodge his attack so simply. Even though he had heard he was extremely weak, Maing Sondeok refused to believe what had happened and considered it to be just a matter of luck on Sapai Gang's part. Sondeok launched another more ferocious attack than before, leaping into the air with force while screaming in anger. At the peak of his rage, he announced his use of the fourth form of the Bull Demon Spear, and he unleashed his final attack with immense power as he screamed at the top of his lungs, wishing death upon Sapai Gang. As the duel intensified, Sapai Gang appeared extremely focused and calm. As he prepared to block his opponent Maing Sondeok's attack, he began to execute graceful and swift movements with his spear, forming a solid defensive barrier. After that, he took a combat stance with great confidence, ready for the confrontation. Maing Sondeok laughed with loud sarcasm, asserting the impossibility of these humble spear techniques, withstanding his powerful attack. At that moment, Sapai Gang surprised everyone by using a very strange and amazing technique he called Fireball, which he created with his hand and launched toward his opponent. Shock appeared on Sondeok's face. He couldn't comprehend what Sapai Gang said and couldn't believe what he was seeing. The fireball exploded with immense force, knocking Maing Sondeok down amidst everyone's astonishment. The spectators looked on in a state of shock and horror at what they had just seen. Sondeok began to roll on the ground, trying to extinguish the fire that had ignited on his body, screaming in terror. The duel was immediately declared over, after Sapai Gang's superiority was proven in a decisive and shocking way for all. He was officially declared the winner of the duel and the assistant instructor. Sapai Gang's memory returned to the past, where he was captured alive by the demons. He remembered how he was dragged to the demon world and how he struggled to survive there for long centuries. During that time, he realized something very important, that using combat techniques like hit yang and high-level magic is not so different from traditional martial arts. In the present, his opponent's body lay on the ground, burned and in severe pain. With light sarcasm, Sapaigang waved for the staff to remove his opponent from the arena, commenting on the quality of the duel. The attendees, students and spectators, began to discuss what happened, wondering if the technique Sapaigang used was truly a martial art. The officials also expressed their displeasure and extreme confusion, wondering how Sapaigang could do such a thing, considering what happened to be nonsense and illogical. Despite everyone's astonishment and some's anger, an official approached Sapaigang to congratulate him on his victory, but he expressed his confusion and asked him how he used internal energy despite their knowledge of his inability to do so. Sapaigang replied with a calm smile that what happened was just a stroke of luck. Sapaigang explained the matter sarcastically, saying that a few days ago he found a strange herb while wandering, and after eating it, he suddenly found himself able to use enormous amounts of internal energy. This sarcastic explanation led to intense displeasure from the officials, who considered his words dismissive and disrespectful. As the anger and resentment from the officials continued, Sapaigang said coldly that it was their right to believe his words or reject them, and he wondered if it really mattered. Then he asserted that he did not cheat in the duel. It was a competition for the position of assistant spear instructor, and there were no rules preventing him from using techniques other than the spear. Sapaigang expressed his surprise at being subjected to this investigation and doubt, despite his fair and clear victory in the duel. At that point, an angry official tried to respond to him, but another official intervened, trying to de-escalate the situation, telling his angry colleague that he should calm down. In the end, the officials calmly and officially acknowledged Sapaigang's victory in this duel, confirming their recognition of the battle's result despite their astonishment at what had happened. After the duel ended and Sapaigang was declared the winner, an official was about to speak to give the next instructions, but Sapaigang quickly interrupted him, explaining to everyone that as long as all the officials were present, he had an important request. He stuck his spear into the ground, and then formally requested to be allowed to take a test for promotion from assistant instructor to official instructor. After that, Sapaigang was seen walking inside the academy amidst the astonishment of the students and other assistants, who began to whisper about him with curiosity, pointing him out as the person who had won the duel. Sapaigang turned towards the students who were talking about him with a confident look, without showing any annoyance. A general view of the Dragon Spring Academy appeared, which is one of the martial arts training institutions established by the Orthodox Alliance, with the aim of training fighters who would later become main pillars of the Alliance. The Academy clarifies that it accepts students from well-known families and sects, and the training is handled by professional instructors who are divided into assistants and official instructors. The assistant's task is mainly to help the official instructors in teaching the young students. Sapaigang entered a room in the academy to face a person who was waiting for him, and asked him with clear interest what had happened to him, and how he was suddenly able to use internal energy. It turned out that this person was Jin Baek, the head of the Body Recovery Pavilion at the academy, who was a doctor responsible for treating the sick, not an instructor. Sapaigang repeated what he had said before, that it was just a stroke of luck, which greatly angered Jin Baek, who reminded him that he had treated him for a long time and made tremendous efforts to try to fix his problem with internal energy, and he considered this explanation an insult to him. Jin Baek felt bitterness and sorrow, and wondered sadly about the point of all his efforts if it was that simple. Jin Baek appeared completely devastated and expressed his deep shame in facing Sapaigang, apologizing profoundly for what happened, explaining that he was well aware of how Sapaigang had suffered from hatred because of that problem of his. At this moment, it was clear that Sapaigang was moved by Jin Baek's words, admitting to himself that this man had never changed and was like a true father to him. His memory went back 542 years to when Jin Baek had saved him as a child from a fire started by a bandit attack. And he also remembered that Jin Baek himself had died on that day while saving other people. But Sapaigang decided that this time would be different, and he firmly gripped Jin Baek's hand, assuring him that he would ensure he stayed alive, and asked him not to blame himself or worry about him. Jin Baek seemed surprised by these words, but Sapaigang reassured him and asked him to just trust him, confirming that he would solve all the problems from now on. After that, Sapaigang appeared in his room in the evening, looking at the sky through the window, contemplating. Sapaigang summoned a magical power in his hand, and a bright blue light appeared. He then clarified to himself that when he returned to the past, he lost more than 90% of his former magical energy, and that the most he could currently do is use magic from the fourth circle only. Sapaigong expressed his disappointment. It had taken him centuries to reach the 8th circle of magic, but he checked his feelings and affirmed that he should be grateful that he still possessed his current magical energy. With determined eyes and intense resolve, he assured himself that he had indeed returned from that hell he had previously lived in. He recalled memories of his return from a dark timeline, describing that world as a true hell. Sapaigong explained that history has been turned back, and the demons of the Jung Marine world have not yet begun their invasion, but he firmly asserted that the word "yet" is the key. He pointed out that 10 years from now, the invasion will begin again, and Jung Marine will collapse once more. But this time Sapaigong affirmed that things would be completely different, because he retains memories amounting to 300 years of experience and knowledge. He has precise information about the type of magic the demon army uses, as well as the tools and weapons they prepared for the invasion. And most importantly of all, he knows exactly how to eliminate the Demon King himself. Meanwhile, the pavilion head Jin Bayek knocked on Sapaigong's door and asked if he was in the room. Sapaigong confirmed he was there and asked what he wanted. Jin Bayek told him that the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, was looking for him. Sapaigong was surprised that the vice director sent this message through Jin Bayek, but Jin Bayek asserted that he didn't care much about that, and what concerned him more was his worry for Sapaigong himself. Jin Bayek predicted that Cheon Simyong's request would be related to the promotion test Sapaigong had asked for, and he advised him to be careful. He added that the test would certainly be difficult, especially since Maing Sun Deok, who lost to Sapaigong, was the person Cheon Simyong had recommended, and it was clear he held a great grudge against him. After that, Jin Bayek wondered about Sapaigong's sudden desire to become an official instructor, to which Sapaigong replied with a confident smile that it was the first step towards reforming this academy. Sapaigong recalled a memory from the past, where the Dragon Spring Academy was once famous, and considered one of the top 3 orthodox martial arts academies. But 2 years ago, the academy's director, who was among the top 10 martial arts masters, suddenly vanished without a trace. The academy searched for him for 2 full years to no avail, and it was extremely difficult to find a replacement of the same caliber, which led to a significant decline in the academy's reputation. Sapaigong headed towards the meeting room and opened its door, preparing to face the vice director. Cheon Simyong, the vice director and head of sword technique instruction, began the meeting by asking if Sapaigong was serious about his request for promotion. Inwardly, Sapaigong described Cheon Simyong as the main reason for the deterioration and fall of the Dragon Spring Academy. Despite that, he smiled and replied with apparent respect, confirming that he was, of course, completely serious in his request, addressing him by the title Vice Director. Sapaigong opened the door to the room, preparing for the meeting that awaited him. He entered the room where the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, was waiting for him. Along with a senior instructor, Cheon began the conversation by confirming the promotion request that Sapaigong had submitted. Cheon Simyong asked him with extreme seriousness if he was truly serious about the promotion request he had submitted. Sapaigong stared at the vice director with a deep and determined gaze. His memory suddenly flashed back to the day of the demon invasion, when the academy was engulfed in flames. In that moment, he remembered his own miserable state amidst the destruction and chaos. Sapaigong remembered how huge rifts appeared everywhere, from which monsters no one had ever seen before emerged, and these monsters began to kill people mercilessly. That was the moment the catastrophic invasion, which was named the Demon Race, began. He also remembered the young students from the Dragon Spring Academy and how they were brutally killed by those terrifying monsters. On that shocking day, he remembered one of the students calling out to an instructor for help, but the instructors had fled, leaving them behind. Sapaigong recalled how Vice Director Cheon Simyong was the first to flee the invasion site, and if he hadn't fled at the beginning, the academy might have avoided that terrifying fate. The screams of the students who were sacrificed that day echoed in his mind as he stood before the 2 men in the room. Then Sapaigong affirmed to himself that all those events had not happened yet, as he had now returned to the past. Nevertheless, he assured himself that he would never forget Cheon Simyong's hypocritical and disgusting face. Then he smiled a sarcastic smile and asked him with apparent politeness what he wanted from him. Cheon Simyong calmly told him that he would inform him of the test details, and that the required test for his promotion to official instructor would be to raid the demonic knight stronghold. Sapaigong seemed a little surprised and asked for clarification if the vice director meant the group of bandits on the mountain behind the academy, and Cheon confirmed that he indeed meant them, and that the test was to kill them. It was clarified that the demonic knight stronghold was the headquarters of a group of bandits who had stationed themselves on the old sacred mountain near the academy, and this group had caused significant damage to the local population. Sapaigang took the paper bearing the test details, signed by Vice Director Cheon Simyong, read it carefully and said calmly, "All right." Then Sapaigang wondered what this test had to do with his job as a martial arts instructor, to which Cheon Simyong replied with visible anger that this test was considered a fundamental requirement for any official instructor. Then the other senior instructor, Byung Ryo Hyung, affirmed that the official instructors are the core strength of the academy. The senior instructors of the academy were introduced, such as Cheon Simyong and Byung Ryo Hyung, as well as Unt Byuk and Sang Pilji, explaining their great skills and their recognition by the Orthodox Alliance as masters of martial arts. Byung Ryo Hyung proudly asserted that they had all accomplished great deeds, such as eliminating leaders of evil martial arts and bandits. At that point, Sapaigang interrupted them indifferently and asked coldly, "How much time do I have?" Vice Director Cheon Simyong answered with complete clarity that he had exactly 2 weeks, and if he was late by even 1 day, he would lose his chance for promotion forever. Sapaigang smiled confidently and repeated calmly with a sarcastic smile on his face, 2 weeks? As he was leaving the room in front of Vice Director Cheon Simyong, Sapaigang announced that he would return in just 3 days, thereby ignoring the 2-week deadline the Vice Director had set for him. This act angered the senior instructor, Byung Ryo Hyung, who lost his composure and called Sapaigang an arrogant little brat, while the Vice Director seemed to be lost in silent thought. Instructor Byung expressed his anger again and asked the Vice Director emotionally if he really intended to promote that arrogant person. But Cheon Simyong reassured him with a malicious smile that there was no need to worry, and sarcastically assured him that the poor assistant instructor Sapaigang would never return. Meanwhile, Sapaigang left the place very quickly using the haste spell, while angrily affirming to himself that Cheon Simyong was just a hypocrite and that he was fully aware of what he was planning. Sapaigang began to think about the demonic night stronghold and recall his information about it, noting that it had appeared around the same time the Green River Forest Alliance began to gain fame, and that the available information about it was very scarce. At the same time, the other instructor was extremely shocked by the information the Vice Director was revealing about the stronghold's leader, asking in astonishment if he was serious in what he was saying. The Vice Director, Cheon Simyong, confirmed with a sarcastic tone that the leader of the demonic night stronghold was Ak Gojiam, who is an extremely dangerous and ferocious martial master, and that he is known as the former leader of an evil sect called the Sky Shattering Sect. He explained that although everyone thought he had died at the hands of traitors years ago, he survived, tracked down all who betrayed him and killed them brutally, and became hunted by numerous sects because of his bloody revenge, and had been hiding in this area recently. The other senior instructor expressed his astonishment at the secret information the Vice Director knew, and asked him with surprise how he had obtained these details, but the Vice Director just laughed and told him that it wasn't important now. Cheon Simyong continued, saying that although Sapaigang had shown surprising strength in the previous duel, it was only possible because he had hidden his true abilities. But he added that this mission was a real test and not just a duel, and therefore, he was completely confident that Sapaigang would not return from it alive. Meanwhile, Sapaigang was moving very quickly towards his target, and he realized that if Ak Gojiam was as strong as he remembered, the fourth circle magic he currently possessed would not be enough to defeat him. But Sapaigang suddenly realized that the solution was simple, and he reached the intended location with extreme speed, where he began to descend using the levitation spell. As soon as Sapaigang reached the entrance of the target location, he decided that he would increase his magical energy and elevate his magic level to a higher circle. Sapaigang remembered that his original magical knowledge and experience were already equivalent to the 8th circle level, and he used the search spell to explore the place thoroughly. Sapaigang noticed that from the outside, the place looked like an ordinary cliff, but upon touching it he discovered that there was a hidden magical barrier, made of magical energy, mana. Sapaigang smiled confidently and assured himself that he had reached the right place, and that no one would have imagined the existence of such hidden places in the Central Plains. Sapaigang advanced inside the hidden place behind the magical energy mana barriers, and immediately noticed the presence of a rare special grade mana stone. He explained to himself that this stone is the key to the demon's power, which they rely on to restore their energy when invading different dimensions. Sapaigang remembered the weakness of the interdimensional travel technique used by the demons, where the travel speed of living things and inanimate objects differs greatly. a problem the demons have not yet been able to solve. The solution the demons resorted to was to plant the equipment they would need in the future in the dimensions they planned to invade, including these rare mana stones. Sapaigang noted that this stone was worthless to the humans of the Central Plains, because they are unable to use mana, at least for now. But as soon as he touched the stone, Sapaigang unleashed an immense and powerful energy. The place shook and the ground cracked, from the powerful explosion of energy that Sapaigang released. And then on the evening of that day, there was a group of men who approached quickly to check the source of the sound. These men appeared to be followers of the demonic knight stronghold, and among them was their leader, Akgogiam. One of his followers cautiously asked if there was anything unusual, but Akgogiam became angry, accused him of questioning his senses, and told him to be quiet and search thoroughly, asserting that he had felt a powerful energy explosion in the area. While they were searching, they were surprised by the sound of clapping from above, and it turned out that Sapaigang was sitting relaxedly on a high rock, mocking them, saying he was sure that Akgogiam was a top-level martial master. Akgogiam grew angry and asked him with a sharp tone who he was, to which Sapaigang replied with a provocative smile that he was an instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy. The followers began to wonder with surprise and concern why an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy was here in their stronghold, but Akgogiam angrily ordered them to be quiet. Akgogiam asked Sapaigang if he was the one who caused the previous energy explosion, to which Sapaigang replied with a confident and provocative smile, "What if I was?" At this moment, without hesitation, Akgogiam launched a sudden and violent attack on Sapaigang, telling him that he would kill him, and that this was the reason he came to this place in the first place. Akgogiam was very shocked when he heard Sapaigang's voice, mocking him and asking if that was really what he was going to do. The events began with a powerful attack from Akgogiam, who rushed with great force towards Sapaigang, trying to eliminate him with a decisive blow. But Sapaigang easily countered his attack, using a powerful spell in the form of a blade of magical energy called Mana Blade, which injured Akgogiam's followers and astonished him. Sapaigang continued his attack with clear sarcasm and disdain, using the spell Trice, and told Akgogiam in a clear tone of challenge that he came here specifically to kill him. The conflict between them intensified into a violent clash, in which they exchanged extremely powerful blows. With a provocative smile, Sapaigang gave Akgogiam a sarcastic piece of advice, saying it would be better for him to avenge his slain followers, which greatly angered Akgogiam. Akgogiam shouted in astonishment and intense anger, questioning Sapaigang's true identity. The two sides exchanged violent and successive blows, which continued for a very long time, without either of them being able to gain control of the situation. During the fight, Sapaigang once again confirmed his identity as an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy, with a confident smile, as he skillfully parried all of his opponent's blows. Akgogiam was stunned and shocked, as he couldn't believe that there was someone capable of countering him so easily, and he realized that Sapaigang was not taking him seriously at all. In a moment of intense anger, Akgogiam let out a powerful scream and a fierce attack in a final attempt to overcome his opponent, but Sapaigang easily dodged the attack using his high speed and superior combat skills. Akgogiam decided to resort to using his strongest secret techniques, the sky-shattering divine domination arts, and activated the core release technique, raising his power level to a frightening extent. Akgogiam was furious that his opponent had pushed him to use this powerful technique, screaming at Sapaigang that he would deeply regret it. At the peak of his rage, Akgogiam revealed his painful past and his suffering after being betrayed, and how he gathered all this negative energy to direct it towards revenge. But he was surprised by Sapaigang's coldness and contempt, who paid no attention to this, and responded mockingly saying, "Who asked?" He told him he didn't care at all about any information about an evil person. In a shocking moment, Sapaigang cast a very powerful spell called Freeze Wave, which completely froze Akgogiam in his place, leaving him stunned. Before Akgogiam could realize what was happening, Sapaigang cast another powerful spell called Astral Chain, which completely bound his opponent. Akgogiam tried hard to break free from these restraints, but his attempts were completely futile. Sapaigang explained confidently that this spell was originally designed to deal with people who use internal energy, thus completely paralyzing his movement. Akgogiam wondered with intense anger how Sapaigang could be capable of using such magic, accusing him of possibly being from the demon sect. But Sapaigang calmly and contemptuously replied that it was mana and not magic, and belittled him by saying he didn't expect much from a mere bandit. Akgogiam was filled with rage and fury at Sapaigang's words and screamed at him that he was cursed. While he was bound and feeling his end approaching, Akgojiam expressed his regret and sorrow that his death would be in a place like this, to which Sapaigang replied calmly and coldly, asking him if he had any regrets. Akgojiam began to scream from intense pain and anger, declaring that he had not yet taken revenge on those who betrayed him, the people who manipulated his followers, when he was the leader of the sky-shattering sect. He recalled his bitter suffering, asserting that the reason he hid in these mountains and joined the demonic knight stronghold was all for the sake of revenge only. Akgojiam tried to continue narrating his motives, but he was interrupted by the sound of sarcastic applause from Sapaigang, who mockingly praised Akgojiam's insistence on revenge and his refusal to give up despite the difficulties, advising him with ridicule that revenge should be slow, thorough, and without despair. Akgojiam felt insulted and thought Sapaigang was mocking him, accusing him of being just a young man who had lived a comfortable life without any real knowledge of suffering. At this point, the expression on Sapaigang's face changed frighteningly, and he told him in a grim voice that he had not lived a comfortable life as he thought. Akgojiam felt terror from the frightening look in Sapaigang's eyes and realized that there was something very wrong with his opponent. At that moment, Sapaigang decided to make Akgojiam experience his suffering for a little while and test the same hell and suffering that he himself had endured for 200 years. Suddenly, Akgojiam found himself in a dark and strange place, not knowing where he was, and he began to feel extreme confusion and fear and wondered about this strange place. Then, terrifying visions of the frightening future that awaited in 10 years appeared before him, and he witnessed hordes of terrifying demons, invading and destroying everything in their path, with horrific scenes of death and torment. Akgojiam began to scream in extreme terror, and he couldn't bear these terrifying visions that had suddenly invaded his mind. Then Sapaigang brought him back to reality and sarcastically asked him how his experience was, calmly explaining to him that what he had just seen is the future that will happen in 10 years. Akgojiam collapsed on the ground from terror and psychological pain and began to beg Sapaigang with extreme weakness to kill him and end his life because he could no longer bear what he had seen. Sapaigang replied calmly, explaining that he understood his request very well, then prepared to carry out his death sentence, asserting that although the matter is difficult, there is someone who must do it. Meanwhile, elsewhere at the Dragon Spring Academy, Vice Director Cheon Simyong felt shock and disbelief as he stared at Akgojiam's massive weapon in front of him, realizing that Sapaigang had actually succeeded in the difficult mission he had assigned him. Sapaigang threw Akgojiam's head in front of Vice Director Cheon Simyong, sarcastically explaining that he didn't expect them to believe him if he only brought the sword, which is why he brought Akgojiam's head as additional proof. Then Sapaigang smiled with sarcasm and confidence and suggested they begin discussing his new duties after his promotion to the position of first instructor. The next morning at the Dragon Spring Academy, the instructors' reactions to the news of Sapaigang's success were quite dramatic. The senior instructor of the fist technique, Yu Wanjin, shouted his disbelief and anger at this news. Instructor Yu Wanjin continued to express his extreme astonishment and displeasure, describing Sapaigang as the Academy's former disgrace and questioning how he suddenly became a first instructor. On the other hand, the senior instructor of the archery technique, Eon Byok, questioned whether Sapaigang had actually raided the demonic knight stronghold alone. The senior instructor of the sword technique, Dyungbo Hyang, answered them, confirming that he himself went to the old sacred mountain to verify the matter. Dyungbo Hyang explained that he found the bodies of the bandits, and specifically Akgojiam's body, in the exact location Sapaigang had told them about. Dyungbo Hyang continued speaking with great hesitation and confusion, stating that he didn't know how it had happened. He added that, with the exception of Akgojiam, the necks of all the followers had been severed with a single strike, which raised everyone's suspicion and astonishment. At that point, a heated debate began among the instructors, where they objected to what they saw of Sapaigang's skills, especially since he was known as a spear instructor, not a sword instructor. But Vice Director Cheon Simyong intervened firmly and stopped the argument, asking them what they were doing. The instructors immediately apologized to the Vice Director, while Cheon Simyong sat thinking silently about the matter. Meanwhile, Vice Director Cheon Simyong was thinking deeply, telling himself that it was completely illogical for Sapaigang to be able to kill Akgojiam and his followers by himself. He remembered that he himself had met Akgojiam and realized his great strength, which is why he saw it as impossible for him to be killed easily by Sapaigang. Cheon Simyong wondered if Jin Bayek, the doctor at the academy, had helped Sapaigang in his mission, but he quickly dismissed the idea because Jin Bayek did not have sufficient skills. Cheon Simyong decided that he had to investigate the matter further, so he asked instructor Doong Bo Hyung to contact the Ghost Shadow Palace. It was explained that the Ghost Shadow Palace is one of the largest assassination organizations in the Merm world, and they are known for carrying out any mission for money. Vice Director Cheon asked instructor Jeong to submit a request to the Ghost Shadow Palace to find out all information related to Sapaigang, including what he does daily, which surprised the other instructors. The senior instructor Yu Wan Jin received a list from the vice director, and when he asked about it, the vice director reassured him, saying that he had an idea about the matter. Instructor Yu Wan Jin read the paper the vice director had given him and wondered in confusion about its contents. The vice director explained to him that it was a list of the students Sapaigang would be responsible for after his promotion. Instructor Yu Wan Jin was extremely surprised by what he read on the list, and his eyes widened in astonishment when he understood the vice director's intention. Instructor Yu Wan Jin expressed his great admiration for the vice director's clever idea, and Cheon Simyong confirmed that he had used his position well. Instructor Yu Wan Jin laughed, saying that Sapaigang might leave his job even before the Ghost Shadow Palace gets any information about him, and the vice director agreed with a laugh, saying that this was possible because he was inexperienced. One of the instructors asked instructor Deong if he had given the same list to Sapaigang, and Deong replied that he had indeed done so. The other instructor asked about Sapaigang's reaction, and Deong replied that he merely gave a faint smile and said he understood everything. Meanwhile, as Sapaigang was leaving the place, he thought to himself sarcastically, and described these old instructors as fools because they did exactly what he had expected them to do. Sapaigang continued his train of thought, confirming that he had returned to this specific time and place for an important reason. And as he walked, he deeply remembered the power he had received from Nazaran and his ability to return in time, and began to ask himself repeatedly, "What must I do to prepare for the demon invasion?" He clearly realized that he could not face the demon army that had conquered many dimensions by himself. There are limits to what a single person can do. Sapaigang clearly realized that there were many things he could do to counter the demon invasion, but he concluded that the best option was to form a strong army to confront them. And as he thought, Sapaigang ruled out the idea of his army being composed of weaklings like those who had died before he traveled back in time. Instead, he wanted a powerful army proficient in all types of magic and martial arts. Sapaigang looked at the students who had been classified as troublemakers among the first-year disciples and decided to focus on them first. He noticed that some of these students truly possessed great talents, but their difficult temperaments and personalities were hindering their progress. Among these disciples were some who had no apparent talent or were neglected by the teachers because they did not belong to prestigious families. Sapaigang believed that the senior instructors at the academy had deliberately chosen these students, thinking he would not be able to handle them, but they never imagined the truth about these students. He recalled two heroes who had emerged prominently during the period of the demonic invasion. One was a master of the sword and the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance, who had led the Merm's resistance against the demons. The other hero he remembered was a masterful archer in martial arts, who led a specialized squad for assassinations and infiltration, and had single-handedly killed the largest number of demons. Sapaigang smiled as he looked at the disciples standing before him, confident that these two legendary heroes he remembered from the future were currently right before his eyes. Elsewhere in the academy, the student Tan Li Zhang was being violently beaten by Gok Boik during combat training. Tan Li Zhang fell to the ground, screaming in pain from the powerful blow he received from Gok Boik. Then Gok Boik said in a sharp tone that the external arts training was not over yet, and ordered Tan Li Zhang to stand up to continue the training. But Tan Li Zhang, the eldest student from the one-star sword family, begged Gok Boik with difficulty to stop hitting him. Gok Boik became angry at Tan's request and told him that others might think he was bullying him if he kept complaining like this. Gok Boik continued to provoke Tan Li Zhang, saying he should be grateful that he was teaching him his special martial arts technique. But Tan Li Zhang replied weakly that the fighting style he learned from his family was the only one he was good at. Gok Boik mocked Tan severely when he heard the name of the one-star sword family and ridiculed the value of their techniques. He continued to humiliate Tan, pointing out that those weak martial arts would never enable him to defend himself, and asked if he wanted to continue learning them. Tan Li Zhang felt anger and frustration from Gok Boik's words and clenched his fist tightly, trying to suppress his anger. But a disciple suddenly intervened and told Gok Boik to open his fist and stop provoking Tan, or else they would have to have a new duel. Gok Boik felt provoked by this student's challenge, but he quickly unclenched his fist and walked away, realizing he couldn't face him right now. Then Yoon Wook-young, the student from the devastating sword family, intervened and ordered Gokboik to stop causing trouble, especially with the exams approaching. Gokboik backed down from the situation, saying he understood, but he gave a final warning to Tan Lee-jong to consider himself lucky this time. Tan Lee-jong thanked his classmate who intervened to save him from this difficult situation, but he looked confused and sad. Yoon Wook-young turned towards him without saying anything, and he seemed to be thinking deeply about what had happened. Tan Lee-jong sat alone and silent after that painful confrontation, showing signs of frustration and despair. At this moment, someone came into the room and called for the three students, Yoon Wook-young, Gokboik, and Tan Lee-jong. Gokboik answered, wondering about the reason for the sudden summons, and the messenger told them that Vice Director Cheon Sim-young had informed him of a new decision. The messenger announced that the three of them were no longer part of the Camellia class, but would be transferred to a newly created class, which greatly surprised and astonished Gokboik. And elsewhere, Sepegong stood facing the new group of students who had been specially chosen for him, who were looking at him with anticipation and caution, while he appeared confident and ready to begin his new duties. Sepegong greeted the disciples with a calm smile, announcing himself as their official instructor starting from this day. Some disciples were surprised by what was happening, and Yoon Wook-young seemed slightly annoyed as he wondered what was going on, while another student showed signs of astonishment. Suddenly, the disciple Gokboik shouted in extreme anger from afar, demanding a stop to what he described as nonsense. Gokboik approached Sepegong angrily, expressing his displeasure at his sudden transfer to a new class with an instructor who was, in his view, weak in abilities. Gokboik continued his objection, shouting that he would not listen to orders from someone who couldn't even use internal energy until recently. Sepegong calmly looked at Gokboik and told him that his way of speaking to a supervising instructor was completely disrespectful. Gokboik continued to curse at Sepegong with anger and contempt, pointing out that he didn't know how Sepegong got the position of first instructor. He asserted that he would learn nothing from an instructor who had only recently been able to use internal energy, which increased the tension. In a sudden moment, Sepegong used the blink spell, appearing directly in front of Gokboik with immense speed, ready to take disciplinary action. Gokboik was shocked and confused by what happened, not comprehending how Sepegong managed to get so close to him so quickly. Gokboik let out a scream of terror as he faced the instructor, who had suddenly and unexpectedly appeared before him. Then Sepegong calmly said that the Academy's regulations, Article 3, Clause 5, allow him to punish a student who shows misconduct for the purpose of guiding and instructing them. Gokboik became enraged and clenched his fist, preparing to attack. He then launched his attack using the powerful and violent, mountain-shattering Dragon Tiger fist technique. Sepegong easily avoided the attack, expressing his displeasure with Gokboik's disrespectful language and violent behavior towards his instructor. He then calmly added that using internal arts in class without permission is another violation of the rules. Gokboik tried to attack again, but Sepegong quickly interrupted him, saying that the worst thing he did was the successive bad actions. Sepegong delivered a swift, powerful punch towards Gokboik, causing the latter to feel great shock and clear pain. Gokboik screamed loudly from the intense pain and began to feel weak in front of the instructor he had previously thought was weak. Sepegong continued to talk about the weakness of Gokboik's combat skills, noting that he was not at the level he had expected. Sepegong began a rapid and successive series of blows that hit Gokboik hard, showing clear superiority. He delivered a final knockout blow to Gokboik, causing him to fall to the ground in a humiliating manner. Gokboik fell to the ground in pain and unable to resist, with a look of anger and annoyance on his face. Sepegong ordered him to stand up, asserting that his guidance and instruction were not over yet. Tan Lee-jong watched the scene in great shock and amazement, not believing what he was seeing of Sepegong's superiority over Gokboik. He remembered the strength of his classmate Gokboik, who was known as one of the strongest new disciples in external arts training, and felt extremely confused by his swift defeat at the hands of Sepegong. Gokboik struggled to stand up again, cursing at Sepegong with clear anger, but Sepegong countered his new attack with complete ease and delivered another knockout blow that sent him to the ground a second time. The other disciples watched the scene in great shock and with clear concern on their faces. Sepegong advanced towards the fallen Gokboik and expressed his displeasure at the poor state the class had reached on the very first lesson, directing his stern gaze towards the defeated disciple. Sepegong calmly expressed his regret for what was happening, saying that an instructor's role is to stop their students' tears and teach them correctly. As he prepared to punish Gokboik, Gottboik appeared to be in a state of terror and shock, raising his hands in an attempt to defend himself against Sapaigang's impending attack. Sapaigang moved very quickly towards Gottboik, while the other disciples seemed to watch the scene with great astonishment and concern. Meanwhile, Yoon Wook-young intervened, expressing his opinion that Sapaigang's actions towards the student were excessive, addressing Sapaigang with apparent respect. Sapaigang turned towards Yoon Wook-young with a calm smile, commenting that he had finally made a move, as if he had been waiting for his intervention from the beginning. At this moment, Sapaigang remembered that in the future, Yoon Wook-young would be the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance, which reflects this student's future importance and great strength. Sapaigang remembered Yoon Wook-young from the first-year Camellia class as the second son of the devastating Sword Clan, which is one of the most famous and powerful clans in the Central Plains. From a young age, Yoon Wook-young was known within his clan for his exceptional genius in martial arts. Even among the new students at Dragon Spring Academy, he stood out for his superior skills. Yoon Wook-young's talent far surpassed the level of Dragon Spring Academy. At the age of 20, he managed to become a high-class martial master and was ranked among the top 10 martial masters in the Orthodox Alliance. Yoon Wook-young was supposed to live a bright life full of success, becoming one of the most prominent and respected martial masters in the Central Plains. But all those dreams and ambitions vanished with the appearance of the demons, as the tragedy that completely changed the course of his life began. From the beginning of the demon invasion, Yoon Wook-young participated in more battles than anyone else, and proved his valor and strength on the field. But Yoon's clan quickly became a primary target of intense demon attacks, leading to its complete annihilation, and all its members were killed, except for Yoon Wook-young himself. Despite this catastrophe, Yoon Wook-young did not fall into despair or grief like others, but continued to resist and challenge. Yoon Wook-young traveled across the Central Plains, fighting countless battles with the demons, and gathered the survivors to form a united front of orthodox and non-orthodox sects. Even in desperate circumstances, Yoon Wook-young led the remaining martial artists in a final desperate resistance against the demons. Sapaigang still clearly remembered Yoon Wook-young's courage in the battles he fought so valiantly. Yoon Wook-young always rushed to the front lines of the fight, and when he unleashed his dazzling sword energy, he would cut down the massive demonic beasts that seemed to cover the sky with a single blow. Undoubtedly, Yoon Wook-young was the hero and the last hope of the Central Plains. But in the present, after Sapaigang's return to the past, Yoon Wook-young was just an arrogant young man from a noble and ancient family. Sapaigang spoke to Yoon Wook-young in a challenging tone, noting that he had finally decided to intervene and face the situation. Here, Sapaigang turned to Yoon Wook-young, addressing him as Little Yoon, and sarcastically pointed out his delay in deciding to act. The two exchanged blows quickly, and Yoon Wook-young showed great skill in dodging Sapaigang's attack. Sapaigang smiled, commenting sarcastically that things were getting amusing. Yoon Wook-young responded, expressing his surprise at the sudden strength Sapaigang had acquired, even though he couldn't use internal energy until recently. Sapaigang said this was indeed unexpected, enjoying Yoon Wook-young's reaction. While Gottboik sat in pain and embarrassment from his loss, Yoon Wook-young pointed out that all Sapaigang was doing with his newfound power was showing off in front of the disciples. Yoon Wook-young asked sharply if this new power Sapaigang had obtained was related to those fateful encounters he talks about. Sapaigang thought to himself that Yoon Wook-young was smart and perceptive, wondering if he was genuinely curious about this matter. Sapaigang replied with a smile that if Yoon Wook-young followed his training diligently from now on, he might tell him this secret, but Yoon Wook-young coldly refused his offer. Yoon Wook-young said confidently that he didn't know what tricks Sapaigang used to change the class rosters so quickly, but he would file a formal complaint with the academy. Yoon Wook-young added that he didn't care to learn from someone whose ego was inflated by a sudden stroke of luck. Then Yoon Wook-young turned and began to leave, and the rest of the students followed him, leaving Sapaigang standing alone. Sapaigang watched them walk away, and it seemed he had expected this behavior from them. Yoon Wook-young's followers continued to walk away towards the academic building, while Sapaigang remained watching them from a distance. The students exchanged glances, and signs of tension and anxiety about what had happened appeared on their faces. In the end, Sapaigang smiled to himself with a calm and sarcastic smile, as if he were satisfied with how things were developing. Sapaigang approached the student Tan Li-jong, placed a hand on his shoulder, and asked him with a sarcastic smile if he thought there was nothing he could learn from him. Sapaigang continued speaking to Yoon Wook-young, saying that in just 10 days of his training, this student, Tan Li-jong, would be able to defeat you. Clear signs of shock and tension appeared on Tan Lijong's face, who never expected his name to be used in such a challenge. Yoon Wook-young stopped suddenly, making a sound that reflected his great astonishment at what he had just heard. Yoon Wook-young turned sharply towards Sapai-gang, asking him clearly what he had just said, not believing what he heard. Sapai-gang smiled calmly and confidently, and affirmed that he was willing to repeat his words as many times as necessary, pointing out that in just 1 week of training, Tan Lijong would be able to defeat Yoon Wook-young easily. Then Sapai-gang added that this student, whom Yoon Wook-young considered as weak as an insect, would become strong enough to defeat Yoon Wook-young. Tan Lijong felt extremely shocked and turned towards the instructor, asking in confusion and panic what was happening. Before Tan Lijong could finish his question, Sapai-gang forcefully placed his hand over Tan Lijong's mouth to prevent him from speaking, which increased Tan Lijong's anxiety. Yoon Wook-young's expression changed to anger and intensity, and signs of threat began to show on him, ready to confront Sapai-gang. Yoon Wook-young asked sharply if Sapai-gang was truly prepared to take responsibility for his words and his official challenge. Sapai-gang replied with complete confidence and a sarcastic smile that he was of course ready to take responsibility for what he had said. Sapai-gang proposed a bet to Yoon Wook-young on an official fight in 10 days between Yoon Wook-young and Tan Lijong, and Tan Lijong was confused and panicked by this proposal. He explained the terms of the bet, saying that if Tan Lijong wins, Yoon Wook-young must follow his training without any objection. Sapai-gang continued that if Yoon Wook-young wins, he could do whatever he wanted, whether it was asking him to leave the academy, apologizing, or kneeling and begging. However, Yoon Wook-young said with disdain that he didn't need anything from Sapai-gang. In return, Yoon Wook-young clarified that Sapai-gang should be prepared for the confrontation that would happen between them in a week. Tan Lijong and Sapai-gang watched Yoon Wook-young as he left, and the signs of tension were clear on their faces. Suddenly, Tan Lijong began to scream unexpectedly from shock, which surprised Sapai-gang, who did not expect this sudden reaction. Tan Lijong raised his hands in clear panic, while Sapai-gang tried to calm him down, feeling surprised by his reaction. But he continued to scream hysterically, prompting Sapai-gang to tell him that his voice was annoyingly loud. Tan Lijong grabbed instructor Sapai-gang's clothes in a state of extreme panic, asking him what he had done and why he had put him in a confrontation with Yoon Wook-young. Sapai-gang tried to calm Tan Lijong, asking him to let him go so he could explain why he chose this challenge, while Tan continued to scream that he had done nothing to deserve this. When Tan Lijong did not stop clinging to him, Sapai-gang pushed him away forcefully, causing Tan Lijong to fall to the ground. Afterwards, Sapai-gang announced the cancellation of today's lesson and asked all the students to leave, while Tan Lijong remained lying on the ground, exhausted. He told the students that the schedule for the next lesson would be sent to them individually tomorrow, while the students left, wondering what was happening. Tan Lijong began to bemoan his fate as he cried, complaining about the predicament he had fallen into because of this challenge. Sapai-gang simply advised him to win the confrontation, wondering why Tan Lijong was necessarily assuming he would lose. Tan Lijong regretfully explained that he had lost in his first official match after entering the academy against Gokboik. He added sadly that he had lost humiliatingly in that fight, and ever since then Gokboik had been bullying him daily. Tan Lijong began to speak sorrowfully about his daily suffering due to the bullying from his classmate Gokboik, but despite that, he wanted to reveal a surprising fact about him. Tan Lijong explained that even the monster Gokboik was unable to touch Yoon Wook-young in a direct duel between them. He continued his speech, stating that Gokboik was utterly defeated without being able to land even a single blow on Yoon Wook-young. Sapai-gang listened to Tan Lijong's words and acknowledged that Yoon Wook-young indeed possessed an exceptional talent that could not be ignored. Tan Lijong added that Yoon Wook-young's talent in martial arts was very unique, even without the full support of the Yoon clan. Sapai-gang smiled with confidence and calm, and told Tan Lijong not to worry about the confrontation. Then Sapai-gang pointed to Tan Lijong with great confidence, assuring him that he was, in fact, stronger than Yoon Wook-young. Tan Lijong asked in extreme confusion what Sapai-gang meant, as he did not comprehend his strange words. Sapai-gang revealed a shocking truth, explaining that Tan Lijong in the future was himself the legendary archer who became famous for killing demons before time was turned back. In a moment of intense panic, Tan Lijong screamed loudly, refusing to accept what he was hearing. With clear emotion, Tan Lijong asserted that even if he accepted the idea of his instructor and his class suddenly changing, he didn't understand why he was chosen to publicly face Yoon Wook-young. Tan Lijong clearly expressed his annoyance and confusion, wondering why he specifically had to participate in a public duel against Yoon Wook-young. Sapaigang asked him if he hadn't yet understood the purpose of all this, explaining that Tanlijong's victory in the duel would be clear proof of his abilities as an instructor. Tanlijong continued to complain and question what he personally would gain from all this, expressing his frustration at being dragged into this confrontation. Sapaigang smiled mysteriously as he answered Tanlijong's question, saying, "Revenge." Tanlijong froze in shock and asked in extreme confusion what the instructor meant by the word revenge. Sapaigang sarcastically asked him if he wasn't the one who was always being beaten by Gokboik, which stunned Tanlijong. Sapaigang continued his speech, asking how Tan felt when he recently defeated Gokboik, clearly provoking him. Sapaigang continued to provoke Tanlijong, saying, "Did you feel excited or refreshed when you saw him defeated like that in front of you?" Then Sapaigang leaned his face close to Tanlijong and asked him slyly, "Or did he feel angry because he couldn't get revenge himself?" With a wicked smile, Sapaigang told Tanlijong that if he became strong enough to defeat Yun Wukyang, he would certainly be able to get revenge on Gokboik himself. Sapaigang asserted that in that case, even someone as weak as Tanlijong would easily be able to achieve revenge with his own hands. Sapaigang approached Tanlijong and asked him enticingly if this wasn't a wonderful gift for him. Tanlijong seemed a bit hesitant, wondering in confusion if it was possible for him to become as strong as his instructor said. Sapaigang replied with absolute confidence, assuring him that he certainly could. Finally, Tanlijong shouted with clear determination that he wanted to become stronger for himself only, not for revenge on Gokboik. A wide, suspicious smile appeared on Sapaigang's face as he declared with anticipation that he would make sure to see how possible that could be. Tanlijong began his training immediately, and he appeared on the training ground facing a training dummy. In the final scene, Tanlijong continued to train under the supervision and observation of Sapaigang, in a clear indication of the beginning of his journey towards strength. Sapaigang sat watching Tanlijong train, suggesting that the time had come to assess his current skill level. Tanlijong stood ready, imagining himself facing Yun Wukyang, and Sapaigang urged him to use all his strength and combat skills. Tanlijong took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves before beginning his serious training. Tanlijong's training began, and he moved quickly towards his target with great focus. Tanlijong attacked the training dummy decisively and swiftly. Tanlijong delivered successive and violent blows toward the training dummy. He continued to deliver strong and successive blows, showing his great determination to display his full capabilities. Tanlijong unleashed successive blows with speed and power, his face looking serious and full of determination. Tanlijong's focus waned as he continued to train, and his eyes showed great fatigue. Sapaigang shouted, encouraging Tanlijong to continue and not stop, asking him to exert all his strength. Tanlijong let out a powerful scream and intensified his blows, using all his internal energy. Suddenly a strange glow appeared in Tanlijong's eyes, indicating that he felt something unusual during the training. Tanlijong suddenly stumbled and fell violently to the ground, due to losing control of his internal energy. Tanlijong looked very exhausted as he coughed severely, and tried to catch his breath with difficulty. Sapaigang watched the situation silently and calmly, studying Tanlijong's condition carefully. Then Sapaigang commented with just one word, pathetic, which shocked Tanlijong greatly. Sapaigang directly asked Tanlijong if he was aware of his current problem. Tanlijong explained with difficulty that he feels his internal energy disperses in a strange way whenever he tries to perform basic movements. Tanlijong remembered that he initially thought he might have learned his clan's martial techniques incorrectly, but after training several times, he discovered he had no problems with the basic movements. Tanlijong also explained that he thought there might be a defect in his internal energy or his meridian points, and he had his condition checked repeatedly within his clan, but no defect was found. Tanlijong eventually concluded that he might lack talent or suffer from an unknown illness, but Sapaigang smiled and told him that was not the reason. Sapaigang explained to Tanlijong that the real reason is that his meridian points are more spread out than those of ordinary people. Tanlijong was surprised by what he heard and didn't fully grasp the meaning of Sapaigang's words. He wondered in confusion what Sapaigang meant by that, so he explained to him again clearly that his meridian points are more widely spread than usual. Sapaigang added that this rare condition is usually beneficial, but it becomes a problem because Tanlijong is still young and lacks sufficient internal energy. He continued his explanation that all martial artists release their internal energy from the dantian to the meridian points. However, because Tanlijong's meridian points are wider than usual and his internal energy is weak, this energy disperses and does not concentrate properly. Therefore, his internal energy does not concentrate correctly, and it continues to dissipate and scatter instead of focusing during combat. Tan Lijong felt great surprise because he had never heard of this before. Sapagang smiled calmly and confirmed that what he said was completely logical, suggesting that he could help him overcome this problem. Sapagang began to remember painful scenes from the past, where he saw himself among many scattered corpses on the battlefield, in a moment full of pain and chaos. He found himself seriously injured, his clothes torn and stained with blood, and he could barely move from extreme fatigue and injuries. Then Tan Lijong appeared in another guise, wearing a cloak and hiding his face behind a mask, indicating a significant change in his personality and appearance. Sapagang remembered how in the past he had obtained certain information by chance, while standing in the midst of a field of destruction filled with monsters and corpses. The scene returned to the present, where Tan Lijong appeared kneeling before Sapagang on the training ground, ready to receive advice and instructions. Tan Lijong noticed the strange atmosphere around him, and wondered to himself if Sapagang had a hidden story or reason behind the strange atmosphere. Sapagang smiled calmly and mysteriously, and said he would end his explanation here, keeping some matters to himself. Sapagang approached Tan Lijong enthusiastically and said that now that they knew the nature of the problem, they had to work on solving it immediately. Tan Lijong was surprised by the possibility of a solution to his problem, and expressed his great astonishment at Sapagang's confidence. Sapagang affirmed with great confidence that the solution was indeed very simple, and explained that Tan Lijong could overcome his problem of spread-out meridian points by increasing the amount of internal energy he possessed. But Sapagang admitted that it is difficult to significantly increase internal energy in a very short time. Sapagang pointed out that for now, he could teach Tan Lijong only one way to overcome his problem. Sapagang instructed Tan Lijong to focus on continuously gathering internal energy before starting his basic combat movements. Then Sapagang explained to Tan Lijong that once he gathered enough energy, he could then effectively display his true strength. Tan Lijong actually began to implement what Sapagang had said, and he dashed with great speed toward the training dummy, charged with energy. With a powerful and amazing move, Tan Lijong managed to deliver a very strong blow that shattered the training dummy and showed his true strength. An expression of joy and excitement appeared on Tan Lijong's face after his success in correctly executing the attack. Sapagang stood watching this success, smiling with satisfaction and pride in his student. Tan Lijong rushed towards Sapagang in a state of great joy, shouting enthusiastically, certain that his internal energy had not dispersed this time. Sapagang calmly reassured him that he had noticed his performance was good, and told him not to worry, because he had performed excellently. Before collapsing from exhaustion, Tan Lijong felt a great sense of euphoria, and declared with excitement that he had never felt such strength and vitality in his life. But in a sudden moment, Tan Lijong suddenly lost his balance and began to fall, losing control of his body. Tan Lijong was confused as he fell to the ground, and he felt that he didn't understand what had happened to him. Tan Lijong began to cough severely and asked weakly what had suddenly afflicted him. While he was lying on the ground extremely exhausted, Sapagang coldly asked him about his condition. Tan Lijong admitted that he felt no strength left in his body. Sapagang reassured him that this was just a minor side effect resulting from using his meridian points correctly for the first time. Sapagang added that his body had not yet adapted to using the meridian points in the new way, which is why this state of exhaustion occurred. He told him not to worry too much, as these side effects would disappear automatically after a few months. Tan Lijong was greatly surprised as he remembered that his duel with Yun Wuqiang would be in just 1 week, not after a few months, as Sapagang had told him. The scene began with a calm view of the place where Tan Lijong was training under Sapagang's supervision at Dragon Spring Academy. Sapagang launched a fierce blow with his weapon towards Tan Lijong, telling him that he has 2 major problems he must overcome. Tan Lijong stood listening carefully to instructor Sapagang, paying attention to what he would say about the problems he faces. Sapagang explained that the first problem is when Tan releases all the internal energy he gathers in a single blow, which causes his body to collapse right after the strike. Sapagang added that the second problem is that Tan Lijong's energy core is still small and cannot store a large amount of energy for a long time, and that trying to do so could lead to energy deviation, which is forbidden. Sapagang asked Tan Lijong if he had understood everything he had explained so far. Tan replied with confidence and affirmation that he understood well. As Tan Lijong stood somewhat confused, Sapagang began to move his weapon in preparation for the next step, prompting Tan to wonder about the reason for this movement. Sapagang told Tan that he must think carefully about how to face Yun Wuqiang after the duel begins, and asked him how much time he needs to gather his internal energy. Tan Lijong replied hesitantly that he needs about 7 minutes to gather his energy. Sapaigang asked in a firm tone how Tan intends to hold out against Yun Wukyang for this long period. Tan Lijong felt confused and anxious, and asked Sapaigang what he should do in this situation. Sapaigang told him that the only solution is to avoid his opponent's attacks with all his might until he can gather his full energy. Sapaigang surprised Tan Lijong with a sudden attack, prompting Tan to scream in surprise while trying to avoid the blow. Tan Lijong asked in panic what Sapaigang was doing, as he felt he was being attacked for real. Sapaigang shouted at Tan to focus, start gathering his energy, and never take his eyes off the opponent's weapon. Sapaigang used an illusion technique, distracting Tan Lijong's focus during the training. Tan Lijong was extremely surprised when Sapaigang broke through his defense with great speed and ease. He received a very powerful blow from Sapaigang that knocked him to the ground, causing him to feel sharp pain. Tan Lijong fell painfully to the ground, in the middle of the training field. Tan Lijong complained about the intensity of the pain, to which Sapaigang coldly replied that he was complaining, even though he hadn't used any internal energy in the strike. Sapaigang ordered him to stand up to continue the training, which made Tan wonder in surprise if this was really real training. He confidently assured him that it was evasion training, which prompted Tan Lijong to grumble about this strange training method. He approached Tan Lijong very seriously, assuring him that he wasn't just doing this to humiliate or annoy him. Sapaigang added that he had clearly explained the reason for his weakness, and had shown him a practical way to overcome this weakness. Then Sapaigang seriously affirmed that this was the only way Tan could even slightly harm Yun Wukyang in their upcoming duel in a week. Sapaigang acknowledged the difficulty and harshness of this training, but asked Tan Lijong if this difficulty was greater than the humiliation and bullying he had endured from Gokboik and Yun Wukyang. Sapaigang questioned if Tan Lijong was really willing to give up this precious opportunity to prove himself to everyone who had treated him with contempt. At this moment, Tan Lijong remembered Yun Wukyang's face as he felt determined to make his decision. He gripped his weapon tightly and apologized to instructor Sapaigang for his previous hesitation. Tan Lijong stood firmly and told Sapaigang that he was prepared to endure a full day of difficult training if he had to, and asked him to continue the evasion training. Tan Lijong was surprised by Sapaigang's words, who dismissed the idea that he would only train him for 1 day, and instead assured him that he would train like this non-stop for the entire remaining week. Tan Lijong felt panic and disbelief when he heard he had to train continuously for the whole week, and he tried to back away, astonished by his instructor's excessive enthusiasm. Sapaigang charged at him with great enthusiasm, shouting that he was coming for him. In an extremely harsh training session, Tan Lijong raised his hands in terror, asking his instructor to wait and stop for a moment, but to no avail. Tan Lijong received a fierce blow and screamed from the intense pain on the training ground. After a full week had passed, the day of the decisive duel between Tan Lijong and Yun Wukyang arrived. Large crowds of students and teachers at Dragon Spring Academy gathered around the dueling arena to watch the anticipated match. The students began to talk with great anticipation and excitement as they waited for the duel to begin. Yun Wukyang appeared standing with complete confidence in the middle of the arena, holding his weapon and waiting calmly and steadily for the duel to start. On the other side, Tan Lijong stood with clear bruises on his face, looking tense and tired from the effects of the harsh training he had endured all week. The students began to whisper among themselves, wondering how long Tan Lijong would last in this duel, especially with his apparent injuries and fatigue. One student sarcastically said that Tan Lijong would be defeated with a single blow and would collapse to the ground immediately. Another student wondered if Tan Lijong had trained well and taken special measures for this duel, to which his classmate replied that he had seen him several times during his strange training. The student recalled scenes of Tan Lijong's harsh training, receiving continuous blows from his instructor with a stick for the entire past week, and Tan Lijong looked extremely tired from the amount of training and the injuries he had sustained. Gokboik watched the scene sarcastically, describing Tan Lijong as foolish and naive for believing Sapaigang's words and putting himself in this difficult situation. Gokboik continued his sarcasm and belittlement of Tan Lijong, considering that he had absolutely no chance of winning against Yun Wukyang. Gokboik directed his words to Tan Lijong in his mind, saying that he had fallen victim to the lies and deception of instructor Sapaigang and had dug his own grave. Yun Wukyang spoke, addressing instructor Sapaigang formally before the duel began. Yun Wukyang explained that although he had previously said he wanted nothing from Sapaigang, he now wanted to set his own condition. Yun Wukyang asked Sapaigang to leave the academy himself if he lost. asserting that he did not want to waste his time in this way again. Sapaigang immediately and with full confidence agreed to Yoon Wook-young's condition and swore on his name to abide by the condition. Sapaigang reminded Yoon Wook-young of his own condition as well, which was that Yoon Wook-young must commit to attending all his training sessions without objection if he lost. Sapaigang smiled slyly and warned Yoon Wook-young that the person he should be focusing on at this moment was not him, but Tan Lee-jong in the dueling arena. Tan Lee-jong stood firmly in the dueling arena, fully prepared to begin this fateful duel. Yoon Wook-young looked at Tan Lee-jong silently and with intense focus, also ready to fight. Sapaigang clapped, officially announcing the start of the duel between the two students. Sapaigang began to explain the rules of the duel, confirming that victory would be achieved if one of the parties lost consciousness, surrendered, or dropped their weapon. Sapaigang also added that delivering fatal or life-threatening blows was strictly forbidden and that he was the final judge in this duel. The duel between Tan Lee-jong and Yoon Wook-young began amidst intense tension and anticipation from all those present. Sapaigang announced the official start of the duel with clear enthusiasm, gesturing for them to begin the fight. Don't forget to subscribe if you like the story. See you again.